You'd had to read lips. You'd had to read lips the whole time. That wouldn't have been good at all, would it?
No, you're good to roll now.
Okay, well, let me just get my PowerPoint fired up and we'll be ready to roll. Let's see. We'll be here shortly. Okay, now I just have one more thing to do, which is share my screen, Russ. Then I think I'll be golden. How's that? Is that working, Russ?
It is starts. Yep, you're good now.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to tonight's seminar. We're going to give you a little update on the company first of all, and then we're going to dive into maximizing profitability and what traits drive that. So we welcome any and all questions. I think Russ will be watching the chat box. So if you're on the Zoom, which obviously everybody's listening is, unless you're on Facebook and then you can't chat, but if you're on the Zoom and you type in a chat message, that message will go to a little chat box that Russ will be watching, and he'll come along and cue that up and just make sure that we're able to answer those questions as we go. So that'll be the plan for tonight. We are going to show you a presentation talking about profitability and selection. And the lead up this week is for our fall harvest sale. That's Saturday, this coming Saturday, November 11th at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, right here at our bull barn here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And that sale will feature 130 bulls, a great selection of Charolais, Red Angus, and Angus bulls. And so before we get to kind of talking about the particulars of the sale, tonight's presentation is about maximizing profit. And we're in a great time in the cattle business, right? We've got small numbers. We've got tremendous calf prices, even with this adjustment this week. I know a lot of you are out there, wow, have you seen what happened to the market this week? Yeah, absolutely, we have. And, we'd love it that would go the other way and not down. But the reality is this market is going to adjust from time to time. I am not a great market prognosticator, but it would be my opinion that we're looking at a kind of a technical adjustment here, and that by late December we'll be back to the highs we were looking at earlier. But don't bet on that. Just know that that's the way I'm playing my cards. Of course, you gotta listen to your advisors, and one of those probably a banker, and one of them's probably a commodities broker. So I do think that with these new products, that like the LRP product, where you can hedge your bet on your cattle, great tool available to all of us now to hedge our cattle, and certainly encourage you to utilize that. So those of you that have been following the company know that we've gone through some changes recently. Back on the 1st of August, Leachman Cattle joined a family of companies called Urus. And you may never heard of Urus, may not matter to you, but I'll just tell you what all that means. Urus is a group of companies, and their motto is this motto that's down here in the lower right-hand corner, and it's all centers around the cow. And Urus is composed today of a group of about 10 companies. I think it's exactly 10 companies. You would have heard of some of them. One of them would be Genex, the semen company. Another would be Alta, the semen company. Transova Genetics, that's the leader in embryo production. AgSource, that's a soil testing and dairy components testing company. They have Peak Genetics, that produces dairy and beef genetics. They have another company called Jetstream that focuses on high phenotype dairy animals. They have a company called VAS, Valley Ag Software, which makes dairy comp, that tracks dairy animals and their performance and all their record keeping in a dairy organization. And of course, they have Leachman cattle. They operate in 80 countries, and all the shareholders of Urus own cows, which is pretty cool. It's a privately traded company, and we joined the Urus group for several reasons. But the primary reason was we wanted to gain access to all their different markets. And because they're in 80 countries, because they sell 30 million straws of semen a year, half of that being semen on beef bulls, we thought this is a great group of companies to join up with. And together with them, we're forming what is one of the largest cattle breeding genetics businesses in the world, and one that's particularly strong in beef. They were very excited about using our composite bulls to make composite cross dairy animals. We have formed a pull-through system with that in conjunction with a feedlot company, GK Jim Farms and Alta Genetics and GenX. And in addition to that, those dairy customers are going to be able to sell their calves for more money by using Leachman bulls. And we're now working on the same kind of systems to help our beef breeders get pull-through demand for their superior calves. And so that's our vision within the company, within Urus, and we're really excited about it. Tonight's topic, though, is to, and let me just say before I go on to the topic, this is not going to change the way we sell bulls to you. It is going to change the way we market semen to dairies, but our bulls are still going to be offered through all the same outlets that we're selling them, still have the same cooperator network, the same nucleus herd. And so Leachman cattle, as you've all experienced it, is continuing full speed ahead. We have expanded now. You'll notice in our logos now, we are dropping the of Colorado. We're just calling it Leachman cattle. And that's primarily because in the next 12 months, we will transition our operating headquarters out of Fort Collins, Colorado, and move up to a small town called Meriden, Wyoming, which is about 40 miles northeast of Cheyenne, about 40 miles a little south and mostly west of Scotts Bluff, or 40 miles slightly west and mostly south of Torrington. So we're going to be right out there in a triangle in basically what is southeastern Wyoming. A great facility there where we'll have seed stock, our seed stock facility and sale barn, and also a commercial feedlot and crop production, and access to a lot more grazing resources than we have here in Colorado. So internally, we're really excited about that, and you'll hear about that over the next 12 months. But that's why the of Colorado has dropped out of the logo, and that's part of the move with Urus. So on to how to maximize genetic improvement for profitability. Well, that's kind of a mouthful. What we're basically going to talk about is how to breed and select cattle to make more money. And we know that we're in a great time. We know that feeder calves today are bringing more money than almost any time in history. And certainly in the next 2 years, we expect that to get even better. And that's going to open up all kinds of opportunities. It's going to make cow-calf production near record profitability. And so that's going to give you some opportunities, right? What opportunities will that give you? To give you a chance to kind of go out of somewhat survival mode, where a lot of us have been in the cow-calf industry for the last 3 years, into investment mode, where we sit back and say, how do I take some of this money that's coming in off these higher priced calves? How do I reinvest that wisely? And really, there are all kinds of things you can invest in. And we're going to just talk about genetics tonight, but certainly, range improvement, water development, improved fencing for grazing, all kinds of ideas on how to improve your profitability by making better investments. But I certainly think that genetics is one of the areas that you need to think about. And it's a place where as calf prices go higher, seed stock prices are going higher as well. So bulls are expensive. What traits should you be looking at when you go to buy bulls? That's what we're trying to zero in on tonight, right? How to maximize your genetic improvement in a way that it moves profitability the most, okay? And so what does that look like? What traits drive your bottom line? Well, I just started to make the standard list, and so it's all the growth traits, birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, carcass traits, including marbling and ribeye and carcass weight, calving ease, how easily they calve, maybe frame score, how big or how short are they? How big are the cows going to get? What's the reproduction like? If you're ranching at altitude, you might be worried about pap test. I mean, there's probably in the average catalog, there's probably over 15 EPDs, maybe as many as 22 EPDs on most of the bulls that are selling on a given day. So you got all those numbers. How do you select the genetics that are going to bring home more profitability to your cow-calf operation? That's a hard question. It's certainly not a question you want to be put in a position that you're going to try to answer in a 45 seconds before the bull sells. So we want you to be prepared going in and be ready for that. So I think most of the audience and all of these presentations that we do are cow-calf operators. And so I'm starting with the assumption that you're a cow-calf operator and you're at least going to consider selling those calves at weaning. You may or may not retain ownership on them. Okay, so that's my kind of core assumption. And if that's the reality you live in, if you're a cow-calf operator and your primary way for marketing your calves is to sell them at weaning time, it becomes really clear what trait matters most. Okay, and in your cow-calf operation, the trait that matters most is cow fertility. How fertile your cows are will drive your profitability. Let's think about why that is, right? At the end of the day, you're running a certain number of cows on your ranch. And you've got to just figure out how many pounds of calves you're going to sell. Probably if you look back at your weaning weights for the last 5 years, unless you've had real drought years, which many of us have, right? Mostly our weaning weights stay about the same, right? They might over time creep up very slightly, but mostly our weaning weights over time are about fixed. And so if we run the same number of cows and we have about the same weaning weight, it's really fertility that's the biggest driver in our cow herd. And if you've been on our presentations recently, you know this is something we're just harping on. We're completely convinced that this is the most important trait to a cow-calf operation. And what we do is we have a fertility EPD. This fertility EPD predicts fertility in your cow herd. And the way that works is Zoetis analyzes our Leachman database. There's 1.4 million animals in there. And they look at how many calves a bull's daughters have had. And based on that, they predict a fertility EPD. So that EPD might say +1 or -1. If that EPD says +1, then that bull's daughters are having one more calf on average. And when we first got this EPD from Zoetis, to be honest, we really couldn't figure out what it was worth. We looked at that and we said, what's one more calf worth? If our average cow has 6 calves, we're going to have one more calf at year 7. I'm not really sure that makes us a ton of money, but we have to try to figure that out. And so we farmed out that EPD to the King Ranch Institute of Ranch Management down in Kingsville, Texas. And we asked them to figure out that one more calf meant. And this is really a pretty neat deal, but they came back to us with an analysis that basically showed this graph, okay? And on the bottom here, we have that fertility EPD. So at the low end, bulls that would produce 1.5 calves less in the average life of a daughter. At the high end, we get bulls clear up here to 4. I don't know if we've had a 4.5 yet. And Craig's on the call; he probably can answer that. But that's kind of the range. And what King Ranch said is really what that's doing is that EPD is predicting the calf crop percent wean. So over here, if your herd is weaning down around 70%, we'd say you have an EPD on this trait of about -1. Okay. And if you're producing up here around 85%, then your EPD on this trait probably is about +1. And that's about the average in the database is about +1. Okay. And if you're producing up here in the 90s, then your EPD is way out there by a +3. And when they showed us this graph, and of course they came right alongside of this with what the financial ramification of that was. But when they showed us this graph, my first inclination was to say, I don't know, that doesn't seem like that could be right. That's like too much difference. So, because my theory is not all ranchers were born in Missouri, but we must have all driven through there. We all say, show me. So I looked into our database and I said, let's pick a bull. Let's pick two bulls that have had a lot of daughters and have been around for like 8 years, because we'll then see how many calves their daughters have had. And I picked one bull with a relatively high EPD and one bull with a relatively low EPD for fertility. And the high bull was a bull called Capitalist, and the low bull was a bull called 18 Karat. And I looked them up in the database, and they both had several hundred daughters. And I looked at, after they calved the first time, how many subsequent calves could they have had, and how many did they have? And the low fertility bull, the bull that was down, he was the 18 Karat bull's down, I think somewhere around 0 or 0.5. And he was sitting at a 73% fill rate. So he was way down here on fill rate, which kind of fit with his EPD, right? And then the other bull was a 3.5, and he was filling the gaps over 90% of the time. And I said, wow, okay, this thing works, this thing predicts. And then, of course, we have a whole set of purebred breeders that contribute data into our database, right? A whole set of seed stock breeders, not just here in the US, but around the world. And we started sending this EPD out to them and saying, look at your cow herd, look at the families where you know you have really good fertility for those cows that have just produced calf after calf after calf after calf, and their daughters do the same. And they said, wow, this EPD really seems to be working better than any EPD we've ever seen at predicting this trait fertility or calf crop percentage. And so then we said, well, wow, if it's driving calf crop percentage, then it drives a huge amount of money. I'm not going to dive into the financial analysis, but basically what happens in your cow herd, if you think of it this way, you're producing a set number of calves, and it costs you X number of dollars per year to produce that set of calves. If you have a little higher fertility, you didn't change any of the rest of your costs, but you got extra calves. And those extra calves are pure profit. They're pure profit, okay? And so if you can shift that calf crop percentage, if instead of weaning 85%, you boost that to 90%, then this trait becomes extremely valuable because those extra calves drop right to your bottom line. And so the concept's really straightforward. Look, this trait is the most valuable thing you can do. I mean, from the top to the bottom, this will cause over $100 difference in the profitability per cow per year in your herd. All you do to do this is buy high cow fertility bulls, retain your highest dollar ranch dollar profit or fertility cows. You're going to make more calves and you're going to make more money. It's the single biggest driver. Now, it's not the only thing in cow-calf, right? Because we know that the calf crop percentage matters. And before I go on from this slide, right? I know a lot of you out there are saying, well, we're sitting right in the middle of this, Lee, and we really don't think we can move that up that much. Or you might be down here below average, and you say, you don't understand, we run in really tough country, and we don't think we can boost this up. But here's the thing I want you to think about. In every one of your herds, there are mature cows who have brought in a calf every year. They've done it, okay? And what this EPD says is that ability to bring in those calves repeatedly over the course of a cow's life, that part of that is heritable, and we can move it. And I was recently down at the King Ranch in Texas, not because that's where they did this analysis, because I was visiting King Ranch, and we were talking about their cow herd, and they select on this kind of a trait. And their average cow in that herd, and I'm going to misquote it, but it's the average cow in that herd has had over 8 calves. Okay. Now that's phenomenal. I mean, that speaks to their management, but it also speaks to their genetics, and it speaks to the way that selection for this trait or this kind of trait is really moving their bottom line. And that changes your cost of production and changes your profitability. It's hugely important. And when we go out to the ranchers using these high fertility bulls, it's working. At the IX ranch, their cows last year bred up 94%. The 2-year-olds bred up 90% in a year with 3 inches less rainfall. Matt Jones in South Dakota, I haven't looked to see if Matt's on the call. Usually he is. I was calling him and he started telling me that his 2-year-olds, he had just under 100 first calf heifers last year and only 3 were open. And these herds are herds that are concentrating on this fertility EPD, and it's working for them. So we know this works, but we also know there are other things, right? I mean, what drives your cow herd profit? Obviously the first thing a lot of people would say would be output. I mean, how much does that calf weigh and what does she bring? But I'm going to argue with you for a minute that that's a hard number to change, right? I mean, we've all worked at it for a long time, and if we're honest, our cows got bigger, we're feeding more. It's a challenge to get those cows to reproduce, and yet we haven't moved that weaning weight as far as the EPDs say we would. Now, some people say that's because those EPDs don't work. I'm not in that camp. I believe EPDs work, and I believe all EPDs work. But I believe in a lot of commercial environments, you're not going to see the added growth from those growth EPDs because your environment doesn't have enough feed available to let those cows fully express. And we had a great year to demonstrate that in our own herd this year. If you were in our part of Colorado, you know that we get annually about 14 inches of rain. We do a rotational grazing system, so we're on to fresh pasture all the time. But this year, during the growing season, we got almost 20 inches. And so that totally changed our grass production. And because of that, our weaning weights went up 100 pounds. And not because we changed the growth rate in those calves. They have about the same growth EPDs this year as they had last year. But when they were given that extra feed availability, bada boom, those calves exploded. But the trouble is we don't get 20 inches a year. We only really average 14. And so in a year in, year out basis, we're not going to see all that growth expressed. So while we try to select for this, and I know people love to buy bulls with big weaning EPDs, I do think that there are limits on this, and the environment puts those limits on us. And as we select for that output, unfortunately, the reproduction tends to suffer. If we're not careful, we can lose calving ease, we can use the ability to breed early as heifers, and we can hurt the ability of the cow herd to breed back early. And that's really what that fertility EPD is getting at, right? It's getting at this combination of traits here that lead to a higher calf crop percentage. Of course, we want that cow to stay in the herd longer, and ideally, we'd like that cow to eat less. I mean, that's the whole picture, right? But it got complicated again, right? They're like, wait a minute, Lee, you said fertility is the only thing, but it's really not the only thing. There are these other things. So now what do I do? I'm a cow-calf producer. I'm selling these calves at weaning. How do I make the most money? I mean, it's confusing, right? I mean, it is, because how do we look at all this in the bulls? And the answer is it's really not confusing at all, because there's one number, Dollar Ranch, that takes all that into account. Okay. If you select for Dollar Ranch, you're going to get slightly heavier calves. You're going to get calves that are worth more. You're going to have better calving ease, better heifer breeding, better fertility, better longevity, and lower feed cost. It's going to bring all this together and balance it for you. And that's the problem. When we got all these numbers, we get confused. And that's what the indexes do for us. They give us a simple way to look for the answer. And Ranch gives us that answer for the cow-calf setup. Now, what about those guys? Now, might be somebody on the line says, I'm gonna own these calves all the way through, and I want to make calves that are worth a lot if I do sell them. So what drives the value of that calf? What drives what your calf is worth at weaning? If you've seen our slideshows, you've seen this great graph we have. This was data collected way back in 2012, back when corn was only $3.50 a bushel. This is 185,000 head of data from steers fed at Decatur County Feed Yard. And there was a huge difference in the value of those calves. And after we took out all the weather and all the weight differences, what the big value differences were: feed conversion and carcass value, mostly marbling, and then of course carcass weight and health. And those were the big four, and they drive what a calf is worth. Now, today, anybody who's feeding cattle in a feedlot knows that corn is not $3.50 a bushel. It's substantially more expensive than that. Because of that, feed conversion today is the most valuable trait in the feedlot. It's worth about $50 a head on a beef calf for every 1/10 of feed conversion. So if you go from a 6 to a 5.9, so you take less feed per pound of gain, you save $50 on a calf in a feedlot. That's a huge number. Okay. And that it's too big to ignore. And of course, it's heritable. Okay. And so what are we measuring on feed efficiency? Well, we put all the bulls in the sale coming up, almost all the bulls and all the sales that we offer have been evaluated for feed efficiency. We've collected over 40,000 individual feed intake records. We're measuring what they're gaining and what they're eating. We're predicting a number of EPDs. One of those is feed to gain, which is that feed conversion number, and one of them is feed intake. And of course, we find huge differences. I always go back to this slide. These were two bulls. They were born in the same pasture, not too far from Fort Collins. They weaned at about 600 pounds. They gained over 3 pounds a day to finish with an adjusted yearling weight of over 1,200 pounds. They weighed about the same as the year. They were born the same week. But one of those animals ate 17 pounds of feed a day and one ate 42. The one eating 42 is like the most we see animals eat. We do see animals eating less than 17. But then it comes down to, well, what did they gain and what happened there, right? But if you just look at the feed intake, the bull on the right ate more, the bull on the left ate less. If you were looking at them live, it was extremely hard to tell the difference. There's a couple of things that I'd say maybe would give you a hint, but it was really hard to tell the difference. But if you look at that over a year, because that was pounds per feed per day, it means the bull on the right was eating like 4 tons more feed. It's a huge impact. And this trait, this feed intake trait, is 40% heritable. So you most of what you see in the differences between the bulls, you're going to get in the calves. And the one bull converted 4 to 1, and the other bull converted 10 to 1. Okay. So they were both gaining about 4 pounds a day, right? Or a little over 4 pounds a day. But they were converting huge differences. And this is really heritable. So if we think about your cow-calf operation, if the bull that ate a lot, if 40% of that's heritable, you could only run 75 of his cows on the same grass that you could run 112 cows out of the low intake bull. This is a really significant trait. And it's the biggest driver of the value in your calves. And unfortunately, probably 90% of the seed stock breeders in our industry don't even measure this trait. They say, well, it's not important. It's too expensive to measure. We don't think that people would buy bulls based on it anyway. There's a host of excuses, but this is a huge driver of profitability in the feedlot. And it also affects that cow-calf chart. Imagine if we had to say this set of cows ate 42 pounds and that ate 17 pounds, you could imagine that that would change the profitability of those two herds significantly. So it's a huge difference. And it's easy what you want. We want the animals that do well and perform that eat less. Okay, that's all we want. We want to find the ones that are the better converters. The other big driver that was in that Decatur County feed yard data back in the day was the profit driver of marbling. And we know marbling is important. There are huge differences between the grades. There's a study done, 12 years ago now, back in 2011, by Colorado State University. And they camera graded carcasses. And then they had by the grade, they gave that cooked meat to 300 trained food professionals and said, a real simple test, thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay. So I gave them that standard beef, and 15% of the 300 people said, oh, it's good. That means that 85%, or about 255 of the 300 people, said thumbs down. So that wasn't a very good experience, right? When they gave them the select, it was 29% good or 71% bad. when they gave them low choice, which a lot of us have said, well, we're getting all our cattle into low choice and higher, but low choice is still only good 62% of the time. And I don't think that's where we want to hang our hat. I don't think any of us would be proud to say we raise a product that's good 62% of the time. If you think of it this way, if that was your meat and you were going over to your in-laws or your best friend's Christmas gathering and they were going to serve it, and you knew there was a 38% chance it wasn't going to be good, would you be proud to have your name on that beef? Probably not, right? I wouldn't be. I would want something better than that. Now, when we get up to upper 2/3 choice, which is where certified Angus beef was, that's where they drew their line. Then we're at 85% good. Okay. But what if we get to prime, if we serve them prime marbling steaks, 99% of those 300 people said thumbs up. Okay. And that's why there's so much value difference between select and choice and between choice and prime. Okay. If we look at a 900-pound animal over the last 12 months, the select to choice spread has averaged close to $30 a hundredweight. That's $270 a head between select and low choice. And then between low choice and prime, there's been about another $20 to $25 a hundredweight, which would translate on that 900-pound animal to a couple $100, right? So there's $270 here and $200 here. So between select and prime, there's somewhere around $470 difference. So the goal becomes really clear. We want to select cattle that have higher marbling APD. And to get a high percentage of cattle up in this red circle, we really need genetics that are really high on marbling, that are like +1 on Angus or Red Angus. And if you look at this fall harvest coming up, this set of bulls is extremely good at being in this red circle because there's lots of high marbling genetics in there. And if you're gonna retain ownership on those calves, you want to get them in that red box to make that added premium that can amount to hundreds of dollars per head on your break even. So again, we've kind of circled around and we said, wow, we got all these different traits. Are we confused again? We got fertility, Lee. We got cow size. We got the longevity. We got marbling. We got feed efficiency. Okay, guys, I'll show you a couple bulls with all their data, and you got to make a decision. Well, it's really, again, not that hard. If you're going to retain ownership, if you got a cow-calf operation and you're going to own them through the harvest, then just select for dollar profit because it looks at all that stuff and balances it. And it'll help you improve on that. And so that's really the strength of these indexes. I think so many of us want to look for that one thing, right? We're like what was the guy in that crazy dude ranch? It was City Slickers, right? And the guys, the cowboy that ran the herd said, "You're looking for that one thing," and then remember he dies before you can tell him what the one thing is. In the cattle business, there's not one thing. If there was just one thing, we'd all be doing it. We'd all have figured it out by now. There is no one thing. It's a bunch of things because we got a living animal interacting with grass in a changing environment with changing markets. It's a lot of things. If you're going to sell your calves at weaning, that ranch number predicts your profit function better than any one number. Now, ranch is closely related to fertility. When you look at anybody who's using dollar profit, any of our dollar profit share partners, Leachman cattle, any of us, and you see an animal that's high on ranch, they're going to be good on fertility because you can't be high on ranch and not be good on fertility. But then if you want to look at overall on dollar profit, then you're going to balance all those traits together and put them together into one package. And that's the beauty of that. And of course, all this data works because we were lucky, we were fortunate to have a partnership with Zoetis. And Zoetis is a leader in animal health, as we all know, but they also have a great team that does genomic analysis and predicts CPDs, and they work on our database every week and give us these predictions. And of course, we're also super thankful that we've got a group of breeders represented by these logos that are all across the United States, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, raising performance cattle, turning the data into us to help drive these predictions. Almost all these breeders are collecting feed efficiency data, they're weighing their cows, they're turning in the fertility data, and it's a great database. It's one of the really amazing databases, and it's really the fact that we're tied up with Zoetis and these great breeders to have this database together that makes all this possible. And they're our harshest critics, and they're our first our scouts for looking for stuff that's not working in these indexes. And I think, and we do go out and obviously talk to these breeders a lot. When you talk to them and say, what about these tools? They're like, we're participating because these tools, Dollar Ranch, Dollar Profit, and the associated EPDs are great tools. They help us breed better cattle. And we're thankful for these ranches, and they raise great seed stock and are doing what we're talking about today. They're selecting genetics to optimize profit, and they're doing a great job with it. So goals are important, and you're going to have selection goals for your cow-calf operation. And when you think about that, you probably want to either maximize that maternal function or maximize the overall function if you retain ownership. Or you might even be saying, I'm going to buy cows and just use terminal. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to determine those goals. And then you need to buy your bulls based on those goals. And in our catalog, you'll see bulls listed as maternal specialists that are really good at just making that cow. You can then find an all-round bull, and he's excellent at making that cow, and he's also excellent at making that feeder steer. And then you got the terminal bulls that are just amazing at producing growth and carcass merit and feedlot value. And of course, our Charolais bulls epitomize that. They'll be the first bulls in the upcoming fall harvest sale. They're selected to be easy calving, high growth, top 1% Charolais marbling. And talk about feed efficiency. The Charolais are unmatched on feed efficiency. We knew that. My first experience with feed efficiency was with Dallas Horton. He had done a progeny test back in the 90s, and he had like 30 or 40 bulls every year, and they AI'd 1,000 cows. And every year, Charolais bull won that test because they were so good on feed efficiency, and they still are. So, you've got these three indexes in the catalog: Dollar Ranch, which is your profit from birth to weaning; Dollar Feeder, which is profit from weaning to harvest; and Dollar Profit, which puts it all together. We also have a terminal index, which just looks at growth from birth through weaning or through harvest on the Charolais bulls. And that's another tool you can use. And these indexes are your best and simplest way to succeed. And of course, now through our partnership with Zoetis, we're able to offer those same indexes and EPDs on your commercial heifers. So if you love the information we're putting in our catalog and you say, gosh, it'd be really neat to pick my replacement heifers using that same kind of data, well, you can. And it costs $23 a head to test your replacement heifers. That's a special pricing available through Leachman. If you call into our office and say, hey, I want to try this, I want to test a bunch of my heifer calves and then decide which ones I'm going to keep for breeding, it's a great tool to use. Now use it to test more than you're going to keep. A lot of the guys that use it the first time, they say, oh, well, these are the 50 I'm going to keep and I'm going to test them. And I'm like, that's great, but you're going to find some you don't want to keep in there. So it'd be better if you tested like 75 or 100 or 150 to keep 50, because then you can use the tool to sort it. And people are doing this now, and it really works. What do you get with the test? You get Dollar Profit and Dollar Ranch, and then 3 indexes from Zoetis. You get 18 different EPDs. You get the percentile rank on how your animals compare to the rest of the industry on all the traits. You get parentage identified back to the bull. And of course, if you keep replacement heifers that are tested, then their daughters will type back to them. And you get the breed mix. It'll tell you what breeds in every animal, which is pretty cool to watch and monitor. So you get this huge amount of information. Think of it this way: all those profit share breeders and ourselves, we're collecting all this data, and then we're offering this test so you can get that same information on your replacement heifers without collecting the data, which is pretty cool. I mean, that's the real advantage here. And this is the trait list. You get birth weight, weaning weight, yearling height, docility, scrotal circumference, teat and udder, milk, mature weight, foot score, fertility, as we talked about, yearling weight, dry matter intake, feed conversion, carcass weight, marbling, ribeye, fat thickness, tenderness. And for those of you operating at high altitude or concerned with heart failure late in the feeding period, you get our PAP EPD, which predicts heart healthiness. And you get the Zoetis indexes. Their total return looks at all the traits. Their cow calf and our dollar ranch look at these top traits. Their feedlot index looks at the bottom. And of course, dollar profit looks at the whole picture as well. So great indexes, great tools to simplify your selection and make it easy. What are we trying to do? We're trying to avoid problems that cost us money, trying to avoid hard calving, mean cows, bad udders, and just the cows that aren't going to produce throughout their lifetime like we want them to. So it's a great tool, and I think it's really a way to safeguard your herd and your genetic quality. When every time, and I see these every day. I mean, every week we send out these reports on inherit to our ranching customers, and I look at those reports, and I look at what the best animals are, and I look at where they're strong and where they're weak. But what never ceases to amaze me in herd after herd after herd is they will have cows that rank on dollar profit at 25,000. So they're like in the top 1% of the whole industry. And at the bottom of their herd of what we test, there'll be some that are always under 9,000, sometimes under 5,000, sometimes ones that are negative. And trust me, when you come and look at them, you can't see the differences. And so this really lets you look. It's almost like you get to have that cow in production for 10 years and see what she does and keep all that data and then go back and select the ones you wanted. That's what the DNA test gives you the ability to do. We're using it to select bulls. You get to use it to select replacement heifers. It really changes the trajectory. You'll see us coming out with some success stories. I saw one set of tests, and I won't mention names, but you'll see a story come out on this breeder, and his replacement heifers averaged over 20,000 on dollar profit, all of them. He tested every heifer, calf, and they averaged 20,000. And so he's not keeping a replacement below 20,000. That's amazing. And what that's going to do for his fertility, for his longevity, for his cow size and feed intake, for his feed conversion and marbling, it's going to push all those traits to the top of the industry. And that's the ability you have today. And the herds that are selecting with this are producing genetics that will do it consistently and predictably. And that's of tremendous value. And so we got the sale coming up on Saturday, and it's the fall harvest sale. And at that sale, like we said, we're offering Charolais and Red Angus and Angus. The main sire in the Red Angus offering is Control. He's way out there in dollar profit. They're really attractive cattle with big hip and clean fronted. They're going to be really popular on sale day. I think at least the first 2 or 3 lots in the Red Angus offering are by Control. Maybe more than that. Let's see. Yeah, first one, second one. Yeah, the first 6 animals, 7 animals, 5 of them are Control sons. So tremendous animals, offering the highest dollar profit we've ever had. There's a black red carrier bull that's bumping 30,000 on dollar profit. The lot 1 Control red bull is bumping 28,000 on dollar profit. So tremendous individual. On the Angus groupings, 9 sons of Vercingetorix are selling. He's a strong profit, tremendous marbling and ribeye combination bull. You're gonna love the type and kind on these cattle as well. Just a tremendous production bull and really strong on the dollar feeder side of the index. And then on the Charlet side, our Lexington bull, powerhouse on growth. He's one of the things we've struggled with in the Charlet. We love him to be easy calving. We love him to be high marbling. It's harder to find bulls that are going to have a ton of growth and have that same marbling and fleshing ability and calving ease. And Lexington's going to do it for us. We're getting some great progeny out of Lexington, and he's got quite a number of sons in the sale. And I think there's also quite a few sons out of our lead time bull that are up front as well. So a number of different really good Charlet bulls that again are focused on optimizing the performance on growth and giving you tons of marbling and tons of feedlot value. So we've kind of gone through the whole deal. I'm going to open it up to questions now and see where we end up. We're about 40 minutes in, so we got about 15 or 20 minutes left on questions. And if you Russ, just tell me if they are they able to send that to you and you're able to see it? If they text it through,
they should be able to send it. Yeah, they should be able to send me a question.
Okay. Let's see if anybody out there is feeling bold. Bold chat.
Nothing yet.
That should have
Hey,
popped
Aaron.
up the
Oh yeah, you got me there, Lee.
Okay, so everybody, now that you see where that chat thing types up, if you type your question in there and hit enter, it'll come through to us. You could also hit your raise your hand button, and I guess Russ could let you unmute so that you could ask a question. I could start. This could be like class. I can see all your names. I could call. Aaron, surely you can kick us off with a question. If any of you know our regional sales manager, Aaron Rasmussen, you know that Aaron is always full of about 10 questions. Now, some of those questions he'll answer himself, but
I think
because Aaron also has very strong understanding of the system, and let's see.
I don't know if they can unmute themselves or not now.
That might not be, and maybe they can't even send us a chat, right? So we're just stuck here.
Oh, here, I got a message from Jared. I did get a message from Jared.
Good.
Are all of the Angus compared to the entire database or just to Angus?
Yeah, so on the percentile ranks on dollar ranch and dollar feeder and dollar profit, each of the breeds is compared to all of the breed data in our database, the dollar profit share database for that breed. So as an example, the Angus in this sale would be compared, I think there's about 450,000 Angus animals in the dollar profit share database today. So they would be compared to that. The Reds would be compared against the Red Angus. The Chars would be compared against the Charlets. So that's a great question, Jared. I'm sure one of your customers asked that. That's great. I see Brian Pogue. There are people on this call. I'm just going to name some names here. Brian Pogue, Aaron Rasmussen, and Donald Brown alone could be worth a dozen questions. I mean, each.
Lee, I made you the host. You might have to unmute people or make me the host again, and I can unmute them.
You the host, and then you can unmute them. I just made you the host.
Yep.
So now you might be able to unmute them. Well, we're not going to keep you guys on here forever. So we appreciate you joining us tonight. urge you to
I did
consider
get a couple
coming.
questions now, Lee, too.
Oh, good. Okay, go ahead.
I got one from Aaron, just to add to the inherit conversation. Many clients do value the sire verification feature, especially those who do not AI and run multiple bulls and breeding pastures.
Say that
This
again, Russ.
does,
I lost the first
oh,
part of that.
Aaron was just adding to the inherit. Aaron, I think I did unmute you if you wanted to.
Oh, he's
It
still
shows
on mute. Yeah.
There he goes. Just to say, are you there, Aaron?
I am now, yes.
You want to touch
tell me
base?
again the question. Yeah.
I'm trying to get things going here.
We can hear you, Aaron.
Good evening.
Any
I was
questions you? Yeah, go ahead.
To the inherit conversation earlier, Lee, as you're aware, there's a lot of my clients that are utilizing the inherit testing, and those who do not AI and run multiple bulls in breeding pastures, if they DNA test their herd sires, that test also identifies what bulls sired each heifer in the test.
Whether or not they're Leachman bulls, right? They can test any bulls, send that DNA into Zoetis, and that inherent test will come back and match them up, right?
That is very correct.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool. And I mean, I know just people are getting tremendous value out of it. We think it's got to be. I mean, I'm a bull seller, so what I'm about to say may sound sacrilegious, but I think that testing your heifers is almost as important as which bulls you buy, because you can, as you've seen, Aaron, there's so much variation in those matings, and I tell if you don't believe that, folks, you just got to go to the family with 5 kids and look at the variation in the kids they get out of the same matings, and you can get all kinds of different combinations, and it's really that recombination of genes that this test is able to predict. And even if you have a great cow herd and you have a great set of bulls, sometimes the combination of the bull and the cow doesn't turn out the way you want, and you'll get less of an animal than you thought. So Donald said they had a great discussion of functional longevity. Any question related to that, Donald? That's a good one. And I see Andrew Freshwater chimed in about how well he's seeing ranch working in his Australian operation. And I'm sure that there'd be a lot of people on this call that would echo that they're loving the high dollar ranch females. I know Aaron was one of the first proponents of going towards high dollar ranch within the Leachman breeding season. So it certainly makes a big difference. I think as we think about the way the cattle are positioned that we're breeding, at the end of the day, selecting our red Angus and our Angus for fertility, in addition to those other traits, is really changing the type of red and black Angus we raise. And I know, Donald, you brought up the discussion of the functional longevity trait from Angus, and we've looked at that, and that's a very early stage EPD. They've been working on it with their Maternal Plus program for a while. It does not seem to be indicating there are huge differences between the sire lines, and I think that's kind of surprising to most of us, because I think as we look at differences between sires, we think the differences are pretty big on fertility. And I think there's a lot of mainline Angus bulls today who our genomics are suggesting are not going to be very high on fertility. And the same is true in red Angus. Same is true in almost every breed. There are cattle that look like they're going to be fertile. They look like they're the right type and kind, but when you really get down to their actual functional fertility, it's not that high. And at the end of the day, that trait is so important. I don't think we can afford to take the chance of using those bulls. I would liken it to saying those bulls are almost cow herd wreckers. Okay, if you think about that, we've probably all used a few of these bulls. I mean, I know we have. I mean, going those bulls cost you a lot of money. You put a heifer into production, you calve her once, she comes up open. She calve her twice, she comes up open. You just have this tremendous fallout when those cows are young, and that costs you an enormous amount of money. And so at the end of the day, having that fertility trait high, and breeders like Donald Brown and ourselves, we're seeking these red and black Angus that are going to be really high on fertility and ranch. And those are the cattle that we like the best, and those are the cattle we're propagating. And our breeding program, because of that, is diverging significantly from Angus and red Angus programs that are not selecting for those traits. And it's my opinion right now that our fertility EPD does a better job than the red Angus stability EPD, and does a significantly better job than does the functional longevity trait. Of course, both of those, that trait, that fertility trait, is affected by heterosis, but we're also seeing within the straight breds huge differences. And it's that combination, right? If you're going to build an optimum fertility herd, it's nice to crossbreed, and it's nice to select within the breeds you're using for high fertility. And it's really a combination of those two things that will give you the highest reproduction possibility. So that's the main driver that, as we see in cow-calf operations, to increase profitability. So great questions tonight.
Hey, Lee,
Yeah, Jared.
do you hear me, Lee? Yeah.
Yep.
Do you hear me? Okay. I was just going to comment. I was talking to a customer today that has been doing this for about 4 or 5 years, and he was kind of joking with me today that he thought this program was supposed to be easier to pick the heifers out, and he's working towards that, and now he's blaming me that that it was supposed to get easier, but it's not, and it's just because he's doing a good job. And I just want to note that if you're not doing it, man, it's a great tool that helps you buy good bulls, and you're going to see the results, and it is going to get tougher, but that's a good thing though. So
Absolutely. It is going to, it gets tougher because as you select them and improve them, they're all good. And I think in the early days, it's hard too sometimes, because when you test them, you find out there's a lot of things that are sub-desirable or undesirable in what you're seeing, and so it's a balancing of those two things, I think, getting the quality up. But I think at the end of the day, it's really a powerful tool to move your herd significantly above the average on profitability. I got a question came in from one of our participants. I can't see her first name, so I can't guess it. But the question is, are we seeing high carcass cattle being low on fertility? It's a great question, and we've looked at what is it that's driving a lot of these lines to be lower on fertility than we thought they would be. And I would say it's not any one thing. If anything, thanks, Myron Durfee, thank you. If anything, it's a combination of things, right? We're asking these cattle to be athletes that run a Ironman contest, right? They got to run a marathon and ride a bike 100 miles and swim 3 miles. And we're asking them to do a lot of different things. And as we ask them to do those different things, grow fast and have carcass and milk a lot, really, those are kind of the 3 big things, right? Grow fast, have a lot of milk, and have real carcass. Sometimes the cattle that have those 3 outstrip their environment in terms of nutrition, and then they don't reproduce well. And I think that's what's going on, Myron. I think what we're seeing is that some cattle can cope with that and some can't. And it's just like the heart thing. Some cattle can go up to altitude and be fine, and some can't. Some cattle marble and some don't. But some cattle can do all these things and have fertility, and other cattle can't. And the only way we can find that is to look at the data. And then, of course, we have the beauty of having the data with the genomics. And it's the genomics that then give us these predictions on young heifer calves and young bulls. Because obviously the bulls we're selling in the upcoming sale, they have no data on their own on fertility. We're looking at their ancestors' data. But even more than that, we're looking at the genomics they have and the genes they have and what those genes did in other herds. And that's really where the power is in the predictions. So yeah, Donald asked the same question. Is there antagonism with prime marbling? In our data, Donald, the fertility EPD and the marbling EPD are about a zero correlation. It doesn't seem to have much indication there. And I know that when Angus has looked at those traits, they've said sort of the same thing. So I don't think that marbling is going to be a big impact on that. And that's one of the things we're excited about, as I know you are, is producing more prime cattle and still being able to do it with quite a bit of marbling. I mean, quite a bit of fertility. And I think that's for sure possible. I think it's very possible to say, I'm going to have a high fertility herd that's very high on marbling. I think that's very doable based on what we see in the data. So great questions there. Great questions all the way through. Yeah.
Left onto North I-35.
Well, good, folks. Well, we're right at the top of the hour, 7 o'clock, and we usually try to wrap these up in an hour. I will make a shameless plug for our upcoming sale. It's the fall harvest sale. It's on Saturday. You can find the catalog online at leachman.com. You can find videos of all the bulls online at Superior Livestock. The sale will be broadcast on Superior. You're also welcome to call any of the reps and contact people that are listed on the inside front cover, and we will help you pick out any animals in the sale. It's a great time to be in the cow business. There's never been a better time to invest in good genetics because we've never had better tools to identify which ones they are. And I think I'm more confident today. I think, that the products that we're selling are really going to do good, and they're going to do good in your guys' herds. And we're excited about that. That's really what it's about for us is having our cattle go on and do well for you. And I think that the addition of this fertility trait has been critical. And if you think about what we talked about today, really we said, probably there's 3 traits that are the biggest drivers: fertility, marbling, and feed efficiency. Unfortunately, most places you go buy seed stock aren't going to measure 2 or 3 of those. They're not going to measure the feed conversion, and they're not going to measure the fertility. You need to shop for genetics at the herds that do. And there are some herds out there doing that. I showed you some of those names earlier. And those herds are really doing a good job at providing this information. And I think your betting on their bulls is going to increase the probability that you hit these goals of improving profitability. So we urge you to do so. Thanks, Russ, for organizing. Thanks, Aaron and Jared. Thank you guys, Aaron and Donald and Andrew and Myron, for popping in with questions. We really see that and appreciate that. And we'll be back again and before one of our upcoming sales. Probably the next seminar will be the Panhandle seminar coming up in October. I'm sorry, not October, in November here, later in November. Thank you very much, and have a good evening tonight.